Hello, everyone. It is Jennie and Laurie of Astropath, and we're here to talk about the month of December 2025. We're going to go through all of the rising signs. You can watch the one for your sun sign if you want, but basically, this is geared toward the rising signs. Before we get into that, just check out our offerings below. I've got a lot of new offerings, and I really encourage you to check them out because, yeah, there's a lot to see. And anything else? Anything you wanna? Any announcements or?
Yeah, just I have an ongoing monthly class, so check
Mhm.
that out if you want to. And I'm going to be offering some discounted consultations for the kind of holiday season, so you can look out for those too, and go to my website to find out more about gift certificates and mentoring and consultations that I'm offering. So yeah.
Yeah, I'd love you all to go to my website as well and get on the mailing list because I've got a lot going on there. And also check out my book if you're interested in learning natal astrology, how to read and interpret a birth chart came out early this year, and it's very, very worth reading. So
Mhm.
check that out.
Yeah.
And without further ado, let's open up the image of everything that's going on this month very briefly before we go into the
Yeah. Uh,
individual
okay.
pieces.
Let's go bust that open here. And this is the same calendar we showed you before, so it might look a little familiar. But basically, we are going to talk about in these horoscopes the dates from December 8th, ultimately till January 1st, which isn't exactly on this calendar, but that's when you have what we're going to see here, folks, is a series of squares as each planet, Mars, the Sun, then Venus, and then Mercury, those four faster moving planets are going to square Neptune and Saturn. And it's going to result in this kind of eight square pattern where each of these planets, the faster moving ones, will square Saturn and then Neptune in succession. And it's going to give us this kind of eight series of squares to walk through. Now, before you freak out and go, God, yes, this might be challenging. However, squares give us growth. Squares make life interesting. Squares really let us measure up against what's going on in our lives and see how we show up. And this one in particular. So,
Yes. Yeah, it's really fascinating. Squares are really important, and people get nervous because squares do. They suggest a roadblock, a problem, something that we have to move through. And it's really interesting how this pattern is these planets first square Saturn and then they square Neptune. And it's sort of like there's this roadblock of Saturn. And as soon as we get through that roadblock of Saturn, we have this mist come over us that we have to move through, which is Neptune. So it's an interesting process because squares, like Jenny just said, squares are about growth. Without squares, we're not going to take the actions that are going to actually let us mature and develop and move forward. So this is really it's a very important time. And one of the things that's so important is that this happens right before the right as the sun is entering Capricorn. So these are happening right on what's called the cardinal point. This is the process of both Saturn and Neptune right on the edge as they're getting ready to head back into Capricorn as well.
mhm. Yeah, and one of the things you kind of need to get your head around a little bit is what is this kind of difficult to understand connection between Saturn and Neptune?
Mm.
Saturn is the planet of reality, of boundaries, where you have to really mature, take responsibility for things. On the difficult side, it can be cold and harsh. Sometimes you might feel that that's necessary, but it is not an easy planet to work with, but it is absolutely the planet that really gives us, as I said, the most growth. But also when you work through a Saturn issue, it is extremely satisfying You get to the
Mhm.
other side of it and you think, oh, okay, I did the hard work here.
Right.
Now they don't always go well, of course, but but it does have that potential to bring satisfaction.
Mhm.
Now Neptune is totally the opposite. Neptune wants to dissolve boundaries. Saturn's like, let's set a boundary, and Neptune's like, let's make it go away and have endings. So it's difficult to understand, but at the same time, you can think of it too as like letting the Neptune things, which is things like acceptance, forgiveness, maybe kindness, maybe some sort of spiritual understanding, poetry, kind of these softer things. You can let those things take the edge off Saturn. And that's really how one way that you can use it well is to understand what do you need to set the boundaries with, and then how can you soften those, and how can you still bring in compassion. And
Right.
even if you need to end a relationship with somebody, there's still compassion. That doesn't go away. You don't cut that off
Right.
just because you need the relationship to
Yeah.
end. So
Yeah.
there's a dance going on here between these two things. And what's interesting, how these inner planets have a gap. They hit Saturn first, so you're like, boom, there's the reality check. And then they hit Neptune, and it's like, wait, I'm confused. I thought I was supposed to set the boundary, and now the boundary's going away. But really, it's a dance
Right.
about working with both these energies.
Yeah, it is really interesting that little dance, and I I mean it's so relevant. I can see it so clearly in my own life, and I hope you all can too. These places where we feel like we have to be cold to set that boundary to, here I am, I'm not going to move forward or whatever it is, whatever the boundary is. But then to be able to step back and open the heart at the same time, it doesn't mean that that boundary has to go away.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Yeah.
mean that you've wasted your time, but you don't have to hold it in a cold way. You
Mm.
can still hold the reality of it, the responsibility to yourself, while also allowing yourself to soften and write a poem to the person whose heart you just broke.
Oh, yeah, and I think what's also interesting about this time of all these squares is squares are very, you have to do something about them. They
Right,
require an action. They sort of bring in maybe a little bit of a crisis, and you have to make a choice. You have to make a decision. And it's coming in after all of these grand trines we've had in water.
right,
So for the entire month of November, we had like a Mercury retrograde going through these water signs. And the beginning of December does still have that. And so it could be it might feel a little abrupt because you kind of had this like flow of energy, this flow, watery flow going on, but it also might feel kind of like, oh, thank goodness, like something to hold on to,
right.
something more concrete, because we haven't had that really concrete, like water is not concrete. So we've had this like healing opportunity, but now this is something to kind of sink your teeth into and really, need to work with and feel the tension of it. And that can actually feel a bit like a relief. Some of you may disagree and have a different experience, but I just want to put that out there
Yeah,
as well.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
mhm. And then
Well,
the only other thing I'll say about it, and you'll hear more about this in each thing, unless you have something to add, Laurie, is we're at a time of this is the final time that Saturn and Neptune are going to be in Pisces, and Pisces is the sign of endings. So we really are these few weeks where you're contending with these squares is a really important opportunity to really work on those last Pisces things as Saturn and Neptune are there and close that process up so that you're ready to deal with 2026, which is a wholly different set of energies that are going to unfold in the year. So this is a great opportunity to really wrap things
yeah,
up.
I think that is really important. As both of these planets will be leaving Pisces behind. Neptune's never going to be in Pisces again in our lifetime, any of our lifetimes. And Saturn won't be there in my lifetime. It'll be there again in 28 years. So, yeah, this is the closing up. The work that you do now is going to really settle that area in your life going forward. And you've got to do a little dance, a little work on it right now here in December. So
Mhm.
take this month seriously. It's a very important period of time.
It is. So, all right. Anything else or
I think we are ready to go.
okay? Let's see there. Just gonna clear this off there, and then we're gonna go straight into ta Aries. Okay, so let's see if we can make this make some sense. Um, so those of you with Aries rising, in a nutshell, this tension that we just discussed, these squares that are happening, this place where you're going to have to do some growth. For you with Aries rising, this has to do with the tension that's occurring between your ninth and your 12th houses. So as those planets that are in Sagittarius get to the end of Sagittarius, they're going to square Saturn and then Neptune before they're allowed to go into Capricorn. They have no choice. They have to go through this gate, this pressure, before they're allowed to do that. So that's the tension for you has something to do with, I don't know, your excitable desire to travel or have these foreign experiences and do something really cool like out in the world. And then lo and behold, there's some kind of hidden block in your own subconscious, maybe in some of your own attitudes, your own beliefs that you didn't really realize. And that's something that might start really coming up in this month of December, from December 8th to January 1. So that's just the short version of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think of this like there's some way that you're reaching throughout this month, you're reaching for growth and understanding. That Sagittarius in the ninth house, you're reaching for that. And the idea is that higher understanding that you're reaching for is going to translate into a more serious path with your career. You can think of it that way.
Yeah.
But before you get there, yeah, you have to face some difficult reality that's in your own subconscious.
Yeah.
And as you face that reality, you got to face that reality. And then, right after you've faced it, and yeah, really kind of taken in the reality of it, you then have to make sure you soften and give yourself some real self-compassion.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's, it's like it's in that unconscious part of you where you have to face reality and then be really compassionate. Because, some of these things, we're going to face reality about something deep that we've discovered in our unconscious, and then we're going to beat ourselves up about it. Well, no, because
That's a good
Neptune
point.
is like, no, soften yourself, write yourself a poem, be compassionate to yourself.
Yes, and
Mm,
essentially, so then that's part of the process of allowing all these planets to go into Capricorn, and then Mars and the Sun and Venus and Mercury all in succession going to end up in Capricorn, which is allowing you to mature in some area that has to do with how you show up in public. That's the 10th house, or maybe you're making some change in your professional life, and this is part of what's kind of tempering you. Like I sort of think about tempering metal, like you're making something out of metal and you have to like bang it out on the forge, you have to heat it up and bang it out. And there's something about this is what you're doing. You're learning these skill sets, you're learning something about maturing on a deeper level. And that's always the case when you have Capricorn season. You've got this opportunity to work with those themes, but because of these squares, it's really exactly, there's more of a process you have to go through. There's more of a forging process. There's more of a, maybe some conflicts or some issues that may pop up. And just like Laurie says, I really like you brought that up. Like, yeah, you can be pretty harsh on yourself. I mean, probably no one can be a harsher critic than you, right? And this allows you to say, wait a minute, I do have to do the boundary, and maybe I'm being a bit harsh, and like direct that kindness to self and really allow that. It's going to help you flower as you move forwards. And that's
right.
really
And
important.
as you move forward, you're going to need to because those planets are going to be moving into your first house. I mean, you've spent the last number of years really understanding some of these deep inner processes.
Mm,
And now you have an opportunity or an insistence on wrapping that up, tying it up in a bow, and letting it rest because you're not going to be coming back in the same way of working on your deep unconscious the way you have been for a number of years now, like
yeah.
2.5, 3 years. With Saturn moving through there, you've really developed a lot of a deeper understanding of your own unconscious.
Mm. Yeah, and that's good. It's a really good point too, that having those planets moving into your first house, like you're going in a new direction, and you're going to have this understanding of what are the boundaries and what are the softer skills. You're going to need both to move into this new direction for sure.
Yeah, this is really, really a very, very important time. Make
Okay.
sure you watch the first part of this video too, not just the individual impact part.
That's good. Yeah. Okay. You want to move
Awesome. Yeah, let's move on. Okay,
on?
so for folks with Taurus rising,
Yes.
we talked, and I really encourage you to watch the first few minutes of this video. If you popped right into this one, go back and listen to our early conversation about this month. Now, what we're looking at, December is a really significant time. And you want to think carefully about how you are interacting with community and what that means to you. Who are the people that are in your community, and how are you managing to navigate those deeper levels of the relationships with those people in that community? There's some way that there's a real tension there. We start out the month with the sun and all the other planets that we've only put the sun on the image here. But right now we have Mars, Venus, and Mercury traveling with the sun, and they're going through the eighth house. Your attention, a great deal of your attention is on these deeper levels of connections with other people. And yet there is a stress with community. That could show up in a lot of ways. It could be, like I mentioned, a stress or a struggle or a roadblock that someone in the community um, that you're interacting with. That could be part of it, or it could be that a very close personal relationship is being threatened by a community that you're involved in. At any rate, there's some way in which over the past couple of years, you've been really developing more of an understanding of what community means to you, what you need in community. Right now, you're in a process of tying that area up, and you don't want to, yeah. It- First, you have to deal with the reality. What is the reality of the tension between how you navigate the most intimate relationship patterns and your community? What is the reality of the tension there? And
Mhm.
rather than getting cold and cutting off the community or cutting off the deeper relationships, you want to set your boundaries. This is very much about boundaries for you around either the people that you encounter in relationship or the people in your life who are impacted by your community.
Yeah.
What am I missing there? So
Well,
you have to face the reality, and then you have to find the softer place.
I don't think you're missing anything. I'm just thinking about these different scenarios, about how this plays out, because I can think of people I know, in fact, that do have Taurus rising, where it's that time when you don't really want to hang out with a group because that certain person's there. And you're like, oh, so and so is going to be there. I'm not going to go to the class, or I'm not going to go to the activist meeting, or, and this really brings in the idea that you're gonna have to deal with both, because there's never going to be a community that there isn't somebody who doesn't annoy you, a group of friends, and just like you said, Laura, you really articulated. Also, you could have a partner who you're like, come to the community thing with me, and they're like, I don't know, and don't let that person, and maybe they don't come with you, or maybe they do, but don't let that person sink or swim, like, I mean, sink or screw over what it is you really want to do in community. So it's really that. And you're totally right, Laura. There's so much about boundaries in this one,
Yeah.
about just like not letting the single person ruin your group experience, and or vice versa. I mean, that it real and I can think of a lot of examples where people make comments like this to me, like, I don't want to hang out in that group because of that. So
Right. Or my partner's threatened by my community.
yeah. And
They
then,
can,
and it's okay, your partner doesn't have to come, right? They can find their own thing,
right.
right?
And they can get over there. Yeah, your
Yeah.
community is your community. And it
Mhm.
with Pisces in that 11th house, there's so much idealism around community for you anyway. And yet you've learned a lot and you've faced a lot of reality and worked through some of that idealism. But
Yeah.
with Neptune there also, and yeah, there's that whole idea of as we move into December and the sun moves into Capricorn, it's bringing that storyline into a greater understanding of the world.
Yeah. And I think
Huh.
the other piece too, like as it moves in Capricorn season gives you this opportunity to work with those more mature themes, and in this case your worldview, like taking it seriously, being responsible for your worldview, and having to kind of pass through this gate of dealing with whatever this relationship thing that's cropping up for you is going to allow you to step into a place of your deeper wisdom, which is Capricorn on the
Mm.
ninth house. And I do think the Neptune for me brings in the idea of that we are a collective. We are all living on one little round planet together. And so there is this idea of the bigness of community, the importance of community is how we do the collective work, is how we show up with the collective. And that there is something about that piece, like using Neptune to understand that, this is your way of engaging with the collective is through your community. There's something in there.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You really want to pay attention to whatever the struggle is, whatever it is. Your job is to tie it up, to take the actions necessary to face the reality and then bring in the compassion and tie up the loose ends around community and what that means to you. Because these planets are not going to be back in here for a very, 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 very long time.
Yeah,
So
like your
you're
next
you're
lifetime.
yeah, you're really tying up some loose ends around what community means to you and really paying attention to what you've learned in that area of your life and how that connects with your deeper connections with individuals.
Hmm.
That's where the work is.
Yeah, nice. Okay, let's move
Okay.
to Gemini rising. All right, so those of you with Gemini rising, we have been talking about this month coming up, December, as having some difficulty. And I hope that you will, watch the first bit of this video because it really helps you understand what some of those tensions are. And in a nutshell, for you, just the real quick version is that there is some tension between your partnerships and how you show up in public, perhaps your profession, or some other part of your social reputation. That's where, in a nutshell, there's some tension. And, that might be familiar. I think probably most of us can think of scenarios where partnerships and our work get are at odds with each other. So that's the quick and dirty version. Part of this has to do with the fact that or all of this has to do with the fact that as these planets, meaning the sun, where the sun is in this picture, and then Mars and Venus and Mercury, as they get ready to leave Sagittarius, where they've been for a few weeks now, and go into Capricorn, they come into this square. They get into this sort of fight with Saturn and Neptune up there in their 10th house. So that just means that you're coming off this kind of more light, playful time when all those planets are in Sagittarius, lighting up the fun and the adventure of your relationship and kind of really bringing those positive things. And then towards, December 8th and on, things start getting a little tough. Some issues come up. There's perhaps some roadblocks. There's like, oh, I need to spend more time at work, and that brings up tension with your partner. That it could be something as simple as that. And then you're going to get, 8 opportunities to work with both the square to Saturn and then the one to Neptune. And the Neptune one really kind of brings in this, like, maybe this confusion, like, I'm not
Mm,
really sure how I should be spending my time. Should I be doing more
mm,
work or should I be putting more time with a partner? I'm not really sure right now. But at any rate, it brings in this softness, that allowing there to be confusion,
mm.
allowing yourself, you don't have to have all the answers, but you
Right.
do have to examine this area, and you do have to examine this tension, and you do have to understand, like, what is the roadblock, like what's the issue, what do I need to learn here,
Yeah.
between these things.
Yeah.
So
And what have you been learning in terms of your career, your social reputation? wherever Pisces is, we're so idealistic, generally speaking.
Yes.
And yet, for the last couple of years, 2.5 to 3 years, Saturn's been moving through that area. Neptune's been in there for a long time. And you've really developed some reality, some ways in which you're have a clearer understanding of what your social reputation is, or what your work should be, or however you want to think about that. So this is really a time because both of those planets are right there at the very end of Pisces, getting ready to move into Aries. You're really wrapping up a storyline there. You're ending something. And this is part of this period of time where the sun and all these other planets are moving from Sagittarius into Capricorn. It's like, in order to get really serious about your deeper levels of connection with people, which is what the eighth house is really about, in order to go in that direction, in order to really go deep into your relationships, you have to face the reality and the confusion of whatever it is that you're wrapping up in that 10th house. What
Mhm.
is the story? What's been confusing about your career or social reputation? What's been confusing your relationship about that? Or
Yeah.
how is it hard for you to hold relationship and a career path or your own social world? How is that difficult? There's some way that that's difficult for you. And you have to find a way to face the reality of it, work with that, make some solid, clear decisions, and then immediately face the confusion because you're not sure if you're making the right decisions, and find a way to soften that and
Mm.
find compassion for yourself, and the other, whoever you're in relationship with is going to need some of your compassion here too.
Yeah, and
I guarantee.
yeah. And what's coming to mind for me with this, when I see this with the 10th house and having Saturn and Neptune, is it might be that you have some confusion, something's changing about your job, and you're not quite sure which boundary to set, what position to accept, let's say, or there's a Neptune component to your work as well. And it might be a time of really, yeah, just being pulled in a couple different directions, or you might be really nervous for the future, that your job isn't going to be around for
Mm.
very long. So you kind of have this like hesitation, even though there's another part of you that's like, no, I'm going to step into this more authoritative place. And I think there's something about that. And of course, all of those things, just like you're saying, Lori, like, of course, those are going to impact your partnership. I mean, if you're the breadwinner, let's say, and you're worrying about losing your job and you're not sure, of course, that's going to bring up these difficult conversations. And,
Wow.
maybe it's time for the partner to like they have to step up in some other way because their chart's also being, hit by this.
That's so
So,
interesting. As you're
mm,
saying that, I'm thinking about, people that I know that, they might be facing retirement, but they're scared because it's going to impact their relationship and their financial connections, eighth house, with a partner. Yeah, this has probably got a lot to do exactly with that confusion and facing the reality of what's going on in the outer world, in the career,
yeah.
and how that's going to affect the partnership.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
No, and the other thing, I can't help but throw this out there, but also with Pisces on the 10th house, it does imply there might be more than one profession. It's one of those double-bodied signs,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it could be that one is fading and the other one's stepping forwards, and you're trying to decide, and one might have a different financial reward. You might be
Right.
stepping towards less money or something like that.
Yeah. And
Um,
it's going to
yeah.
impact your partnership.
Yeah. So I think we I think we've gotten the point across. The final thing is just to recognize this few weeks is really setting the stage for you to close something down in that 10th house, so that when Saturn and Neptune both go back into Aries, you're ready to step into that Aries space, which in your case could have something to do with being some sort of community leader or showing some leadership
Mm.
skills. So your ability to deal with this tension, kind of work through this period of time, is really going to lay the path for you
Yeah.
to step into that space.
Yeah.
Is coming up
Yeah,
next year.
that space of community is going to become really significant over the coming years for sure.
Yeah.
That's really
Okay.
interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. You want to go? Should we carry on?
Yeah, let's carry on. Let's carry
Okay.
on.
Yeah.
Let's go to Cancer rising.
Right.
Huh, I know a few people with Cancer rising. So if you have Cancer rising, I really want you, first of all, if you didn't listen to the very beginning of this video before we got into the individual parts, I really would encourage you to do so because this is a very important month and there's a lot going on that we want to pay attention to. There's a lot of stress in this month, which sorry to have to tell you that, but there is. There's a lot of stress. The sun is not traveling alone. It never travels alone, but right now it's traveling with quite a little posse. It's got Mars with it, it's got Venus, and it's got Mercury. So there's a whole bunch of planets, and throughout the course of this month, all of those planets are going to form a challenging square aspect to both Saturn and Neptune. So for you, we want to think that where's the tension? Where's the tension coming from? And the tension is coming from something in the outer world, something in the area of your own view or understanding of the wider world. It could be it could be coming from your where you're trying to get an education, or it could be coming from the desire to travel. That ninth house is interesting because it really encompasses all of the experiences that build our understanding of the world. It can have a lot to do with our personal culture also. Yeah, it's our view of the wider world. So that's where the tension is coming from. There's been a lot of development over the last some years, 2 or 3 years in this area for you if you've got Cancer rising. You've been really facing reality here and looking at your own understanding of the world. And it's in that area that you are currently being confronted with some roadblocks. There's something in the area of your day-to-day routines, that sixth house where these planets are mostly moving through the month. Your day-to-day routines are being triggered in some way, roadblocked by something in your worldview. That could be, a travel plan, or maybe you've just gotten taken off the streets and thrown in a place because you don't have the proper documentation to live in this country. There's many ways that this could play out, but there's something in that area that is really a stress to your day-to-day routines. You need to face the reality of that stress and bring in, as soon as it's so interesting because each of these planets, first they square Saturn, then they square Neptune. It's like you face reality, you work around that roadblock, whatever it is. Maybe you have to change your flights or, whatever that roadblock is, you've got to face it. And as soon as you start trying to move forward after facing it, you're going to have to deal with Neptune, which is going to try to dissolve whatever boundary is there. Um, and, I think the way to deal with that is to bring in a lot of compassion for yourself, for others. What do you want to add here, Jennie, since this might be personal to you?
Well, just thinking about the other piece of this is it's all these planets in Sagittarius. So again, the Sun, Mars, Mercury, and Venus, they're trying to get to Capricorn and they're going to get to Capricorn. But before they're allowed to do that, they have to be at cross purposes with whatever this thing that Saturn and Neptune is demanding of you that has to do with their worldview. And so in order for you to kind of allow those planets to go into Capricorn, which will then light up your area of life that is about your serious partnerships, you have to pass through this kind of push pull of Saturn and Neptune. So, in other words, it might be that you need to I mean, I can't help but think that the ninth house also has is legal issues and religion, so there might be something to do with like a roadblock where you have to jump through a legal hoop in order to formalize a partnership that
Hmm.
you're going into. So all those planets are trying to go into that seventh house where, again, where you've got Capricorn and you're very serious about your relationships. And the sort of the tempering of those planets, while they're still in Sagittarius, the idea of like, whoa, you've got to like tamp down your enthusiasm, but you also need to develop more kindness and compassion at the same in the same window of time in order for you to really step forward in that Capricorn area of life when the planets all move there.
Mhm.
So I think that's part of it. And the other piece is that Saturn and Neptune are also going to leave Pisces and go into Aries, and they are going to be in your 10th house. So that's bringing some matter into your professional life. And this is all preparing you to move into another stage of your professional life down the road. So you're trying to learn. So take this time seriously, because even if it's really hard, these things are trying to teach you something that you really need to step into this next chapter of your life. And that's the bottom line. That's what Laurie and I really want to get across to you, is how to navigate these short-term roadblocks in these few weeks so that you develop a permanent or at least an enduring skill set to take you into the next thing. And it's a skill set that has to do with boundaries and it has to do with compassion.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Side by side. And they're
Yeah.
not always, they're not compatible energies. Saturn wants to build the wall and build the boundaries, and it can get very cold and hard in order to do so. And with this combination, it's like you have to be able to hold a line, hold a boundary,
Yeah.
while also wrapping it up in a warm blanket of compassion. I mean, you just have to be
Yeah.
able to walk and chew gum at the same time. Yeah,
It's
it's
yeah.
tricky. It's a tricky one.
Well,
And it is,
mm,
because those planets in Pisces are moving into Aries. Yeah, this is the end of a cycle.
yeah.
The development for you of your understanding of your worldview, that is finished for a long time. As far as, these planets are not going to revisit that area for a
Mhm.
very, very long time.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this, especially with the ninth house involvement, really is about a mindset. About if you think boundaries are walls and there's no room for compassion, well, boundaries are not walls. They are, I mean, I like to call them semi-permeable membranes. I studied botany, so there's that idea of there is things that are allowed to exchange across those walls and move across them. And so that they become, they are conduits, they're not just like a stay out, you decide. And that's why we're all being asked to learn what does Saturn and Neptune mean together anyway, like right
That
now.
is so awesome. The way you said that, for some reason, I feel like I've struggled for so long to try to understand how these two work together. But I think that it really is. It's like you have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. You have to be able to set a boundary and be compassionate at the same time. They are not, it's not healthy to keep them apart,
Yeah.
actually.
And they're not mutually exclusive. They work together,
Yeah.
even if it's weird.
Yeah, even if it feels weird, which it does.
All
Yes.
righty. Shall we?
Okay. Yes,
Okay.
moving on.
So we are on Leo now. So let's see. For those of you with Leo rising, well, we've really talked about this month of December, especially December 8th through actually January 1st. We have sort of a series of trials and tribulations that one must pass through. And it is bringing up tension for all of us. And the quick version for Leo rising is that there's tension between your fifth house and your eighth house by this configuration, by these squares that are happening from the sun and Mars and Venus and Mercury coming into the square contact with Saturn and Neptune. So that's the square. And for you, it's pitting the fifth and the eighth house somehow together. And the fifth house and the eighth house are really interesting because the fifth house, in a lot of ways, it's how you give love. It's where you're willing to take risks. It's really the house of pleasure, the house of joy. It's also the house of children, and I really think of it as that playful, joyful energy of children. That's the fifth house. It's a wonderful place of creative self-expression. And the eighth house is where you start bumping into other people's values. So you can see a lot of different ways that these two things can bump, can be at odds with each other. One example I was thinking of is, let's say you're making pottery and you do it because you love it, but you also want to sell it. So you have a contract with a merchant and they don't like your new stuff. And they're like, I'm not selling your new stuff. That would be an example of your fifth house creative stuff coming up against somebody else's values that they just don't like your stuff. There's a ton of other ways you can think about this. In fact, I know Laurie, you had some great ones.
You might
Even
want to have a
in practice.
child and your partner says no way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. There's
Oh,
many ways.
There's a lot of, I don't know, and so if you have Leo rising, think about your own life, think about what some of those topics might be. Because that's really the kind of the center point of this December horoscope is this idea that you have to deal with this tension. And Saturn, which is the first planet all of those faster moving planets hit, presents a wall, a reality check, a no, a hard no you get from somebody else, or maybe your reaction to somebody else is a hard no, and then it hits Saturn, I mean, sorry, Neptune, a couple days later in each case. So then you're forced to go, wait a minute, am I being too harsh?
Hmm.
Did I just push somebody out of my life that I no, I actually can be softer, or maybe I'm not dealing with, I'm finding myself unwilling to be forgiving.
Hmm.
And that maybe it's time to consider what forgiving might look like. That it's bringing in that, and so it can be confusing because you might be like, nope, I know, screw that, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And then, wait a minute, actually I can't do that, I have to do a dance, I've got to soften. So that's kind of what it's bringing in, this kind of push pull energy between those areas, those two areas that really have to ultimately have to do with your resources, your values.
Yeah.
So I think that that's what's going on.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because it's like this work has to be done before the sun can move into Capricorn.
Yeah.
It's like all of this activity in the fifth house, that house of fun. It's like every year when the sun moves through Sagittarius, it then goes into Capricorn. And so after all this fun, we get serious about the day-to-day routines. For you with Leo rising, that's what happens. Sun moves into Capricorn and you get serious about the day-to-day routines. So before you can do that, you've got to face this issue, whatever it is, with navigating other people's beliefs, other people's ideas, other people's money, whatever it is, other people's values. That's where the challenge is.
Mhm.
And what's important to understand is that this period of time is so important because this is ending the cycle. Saturn and Neptune are both going to be going into Aquarius. This is really ending their time. They've done their little back and forth, their little retrogrades, but it's ending their time in your eighth house. You have been learning a great deal. You have faced a lot of reality in the last few years and done a lot of work around how you navigate those deep places where you are connected with other people. So you're wrapping up that story by understanding how to work with it through this process, through these few weeks. And
Yeah.
then when those planets move into Aries, it's going to be a whole different story about really the development of your worldview in a new way.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, by having all the faster moving planets moving into Capricorn, it's like the focus is then going to be more and more on your routines and your practices, all the things that keep you healthy, your lifestyle choices that enable you to, you're pretty serious about those because you've got Capricorn there. So there is a need to be fairly, accountable to how you take care of yourself. Like you have to be pretty serious about that point. But those planets won't move into Capricorn until they've already gone through that stress test with the Saturn Neptune. So it really gives you this opportunity to kind of, you know, see where you're really at and how do you want to really, what responsibility do you need to take for yourself in those
It's
days?
really fascinating how this is playing out. It's like we
I
really
know.
do. We have to face reality and develop a softness at the same time.
Yeah.
And then we can move forward. But it's going to be a little bit of a rocky month.
Yeah. Well, let's move to Virgo rising. Speaking of that.
All right. Okay. So, for those of us with Virgo rising, oh, this one's so obvious. This one's so obvious. Where's the stress? The stress is coming from your partnership, whatever that might mean. It may be your spouse, it may be your most intimate best friend, it may be a work colleague, but there's some way that there is stress that is coming from that area that's really impacting you in a big way, your area of home and family. Huh. It's interesting. The sun, first of all, actually, I want to pause and say if you did not watch the very beginning of this video before we went into the individual parts, please do so. There's some important information in there that will help you understand this. The sun is not traveling alone. It is traveling with Mars, with Venus, and with Mercury. And so there are actually 8 times where each of these planets squares, which is a challenging aspect. It's a roadblock. It's like we feel like each of these internal parts of us are hitting this roadblock again and again. And, that sounds horrible, doesn't it? It's like, oh my God, it's going to be a horrible month. Well, we're learning so much from this. Saturn becomes our friend as we get older. I just want to throw that out there. We are learning a lot. What we are learning right now is how to set the boundaries that we need to between our partner and our home or our family, and to do that in a way that's not just hard and cold, because Neptune brings in the softer side. So we may feel initially like, oh, I've got to put up that roadblock. I've got to put up that boundary and not let that person come to my house anymore, or whatever the story is. But then a few days after each of these planets hits Saturn, then it hits Neptune. So it's like, okay, so you set the boundary, but now you've got to soften it because there's still a friendship that you can develop with this person. You don't want to, throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. And yeah, I mean, this is the wrapping up of a long cycle. You want to take over there?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've really been talking about with these is just this idea that you have these few weeks to really kind of hone this skill set that you've already been working on, for a while. And this is the final phase, and because you've got these squares that are happening, it's really this like forging, this kind of final series of stress tests to see how you handle this, because these are skills that are long lasting,
Mhm.
especially this one where this isn't just now and whoever these people are now. This is going forwards, whoever you come into one-on-one connection with, that you can trust. You're developing this deeper trust where you're going to be able to set the boundary, and you're going to learn how to do it kindly. Maybe not perfectly, and you're still going to screw up, because we all do, but you're learning these lessons. Like, these are lessons that are now tools in your toolbox that you get to
Mhm.
keep. So that's kind of what we're trying to get across, and that all of these planets, as the faster moving planets, they're getting ready to go in Capricorn. So they're all in Sagittarius. They hit this roadblock. They get all confused. They do the thing, and then they get to go into Capricorn. And when they go into Capricorn, what they're doing, interestingly, is lighting up that place of your life where you are seeking pleasure, where you're doing creative pursuits. Maybe you're taking some risks, but you're really living in this joyful place. But it's funny because you have Capricorn here. So it really just means that you are serious about your joy, and you are serious about your pleasure. And that's what you get to move towards in passing through this gate, where you're learning more about boundaries and learning how to be softer. And it's just going to make it that much more joyful when those planets move there.
It's so important how we navigate this period of time
Yeah.
and these little gates that we're going through, because it really is wrapping up this long story of, and really deepening for you, really deepening your understanding of what relationship means, and how you share your home, your family, your entire ancestral line with other people. It's an important period of time. So
Yes.
anticipate the challenges and know that right after each wall, there's a softening available. But you have to work for the softening as well.
Yeah.
There's a
Started.
lot of work to do this month.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Squares and Mars and Saturn and yep. All right.
Yeah. Whew.
All right. Let's move on to Libra. Okay. So those of you who have Libra rising, let's have a little chat about December. December is a pretty challenging month in a lot of ways. But that's not to say it can't be fruitful.
Mm.
And if you want to hear more about that, check out the beginning of this video if you haven't already. But in a nutshell, there's this situation where there's some tension that's being set up. And the tension ultimately is for your learning. And for you with Libra rising, there's some tension between the way that you use your voice. So the way you ask for what you need, the way you navigate your environment using your voice and speak up for yourself. There's some tension between that and sort of your day-to-day routines, the daily habits in your life. Your work life can be part of that
Mm.
sixth house. So as I think Laurie's really been saying is that the tension is coming from the sixth house where your routines are and your day to day, your habits, your practices, and so on and so forth. And then when these faster moving planets that are in Sagittarius square Saturn and then Neptune successively, you're just kind of coming up against these issues. And for you with Libra rising, the issue really has to do with your voice, with asking for what you need. So that's kind of the quick version of where the tension might come out in your chart. But the important things to understand are as the sun and then it's traveling with Mars and Mercury and Venus, as they come to the very end of Sagittarius and prepare to move into Capricorn, that's when these squares happen.
Mm.
So these planets are coming along and then bam, they hit Saturn. And that really is like a wall, or I've been thinking of it as like a hard no, like like you really bump into something that like you kind of break your nose on the wall, boom. So think about that with the sixth house. So that's the first part of it. And then very quickly, each of those planets will then square Neptune, which kind of brings in this need for the softer part of it, need for some acceptance, maybe some forgiveness, maybe a little more magic, like allowing for there to be magic in your routines. I mean, that's really what happens when you've got Pisces on the sixth house. So that's kind of the basic gist of these planets kind of hitting those places of reality and then maybe some confusion to do with your routines. Yeah. What do you want to add to that picture there, Lori?
I'm getting confused looking at it for some reason. It must be that Neptune
Neptune. Stop
symbol.
looking at that.
But yeah, I mean, this is a really interesting one because it is happening here right before these planets, all of them, the Sun, Mars, Venus, Mercury, and Neptune and Saturn are all moving into a cardinal sign. So this is a really strong statement. It's like just before we get to really blast into a whole new phase of things, really we have these struggles. And for those of you with Libra rising, you've been working really hard to develop a way of understanding your day-to-day routines with some reality, and you've been really working hard on this area for quite a while. This going through this gate of these challenges, this challenge to face reality, this challenge to soften at the same time, you're really allowing this stage of life to end before those two planets, Saturn and Neptune, move over the line into your seventh house. And yes, they have dipped in there before these retrogrades, but this is going to push them in there for the long haul. So we're really ending the development and work that we've been doing for so long in that sixth house. Um, no, it's really important how you navigate this, how you navigate how you're asking for what you need in your day-to-day routines, how I'm thinking about this, if you think about that third house also as siblings,
Yeah.
you know, how do you get a great deal of joy and a lot of good energy from your relationships with your siblings? And how is that being challenged by your routines?
Mm, hmm.
What is the challenge? What is it in the day-to-day routines that is causing there to be some challenge to those relationships?
Yeah.
And how you use your voice in those relationships, how you use your voice in general. There's something in those day-to-day routines that you're going to have to face and not get cold. Wrap it in the warmth of that Neptune before it moves forward. I don't know if anything I said made things more confusing or
No, I liked where you're going with it because I think I was thinking something about, the third house, if you're talking about siblings, especially, and it can be other relatives, cousins, and so on, there's a familiarity there. And familiarity means people want you to kind of stay the same. So you might be developing some kind of change because you need to do something different to take better care of your health or what have you, that you might be kind of coming up against maybe some not necessarily disapproval, but more like, hey, we don't want you to change. We like you how you are. And you're going, yeah, but I need to change these things. So I feel like that's what was coming up for me is that tension and around those two things. And that also this is such a preparatory period because as Laurie, as you said, like as the faster moving planets go into Capricorn and go into your fourth house, this is going to be where you need to be more serious about like, something in your home life. And then as Saturn and Neptune go into your into Aries and into your seventh house later in 2026 in February, there's a whole new chapter opening up. And this is a preparatory period for you to kind of try this out and see what you can learn from it. In the third and the sixth house, you're trying to learn new things anyway.
yeah,
So you're really trying to prepare for this switch. And it's giving you an opportunity to do that dance of, hey, I want to set boundaries, but I also want to be kind and I still want to have fun with my siblings that I like to laugh with. And I need to make these changes. So how do I do both? I mean,
right.
that's really what it's bringing up.
Right. Yeah. I,
Yeah.
it's really interesting, and I could go down a hell of a rabbit hole here because this is my sister's, and I can see exactly how it plays out. And it is really interesting to see this as a longer term shift, or yeah, the what we have to do now to prepare for the longer term shift.
Yeah.
As the attention for those with Libra rising is really pushing into that seventh house. What are the responsibilities that are required
Yeah.
longer term around the development or stabilization of the partnership?
And while those faster planets are in Capricorn and in your fourth house, so basically through the middle of January there, you really want to make sure you're feeling kind of anchored in your home life.
Yeah,
That grounding in your home life is going to be very helpful.
yeah,
So this one really is be the hermit, be in your home so you can really anchor and ground it the way you want. Doesn't mean don't go out, but just really get that home space,
right. Huh.
something that really
That's
suits you.
it's fascinating. I love it. Okay,
Right.
let's move on to folks with Scorpio rising.
That's right.
Okay, so if you've got Scorpio rising, first of all, if you did not watch the very beginning of this video or the video that we made previously about the entire month of December, please go back, at least watch the beginning of this one, because it'll give you a lot more information that'll help you see what we're working with here. What's happening is that the sun, as it moves through sign by sign, it generally is traveling with other planets. Right now, the sun is traveling with Mars, Venus, and Mercury. So they're all in a little gathering together. And they start out and spend most of the month in Sagittarius. For you, that is your second house, which is your money, resources, your self-worth, how you hold your own value. With Sagittarius in that house, it's kind of a joyful place in general for you. You probably have a fairly good self-worth. There's a lot of stress that comes in December. Let's just be clear. December is not an easy month because each of these four planets, like I said, the Sun, Mars, Mercury, and Venus, each of those four planets are going to come up against a challenging square aspect to both Neptune and Saturn. That's a lot of stress. Squares bring challenge, they bring tension. So the tension for you is going to be coming from the area of the fifth house. The fifth house is about how we give of ourselves. How, you can think of that fifth house as your creativity, as your love, the love you give. Children can often be part of that, the more joyful part of children, fun, risk taking. The fifth house is a really joyful house. However, that's where the tension's coming from for you right now. And that's where there has been a great deal of work and development for the last 2.5 years or so. There's been a lot of work and development around that area. Right now, what's the tension between how you give love, your creativity, and your self-worth? That's the thing that you want to really look at and anticipate that you are going to be up against that tension
Mhm.
throughout the course of this month. Um, it could be as simple as your children need new hockey equipment and it's too expensive and it's really interfering with your finances. Or it could be that you just found out you're going to have another baby and who the hell can afford that? And do you really want to do that anyway? I mean, there's many ways that this tension could be playing out between your creativity and your finances or your self-worth. That's where the tension is. You want to think that first of all, you've got to face the reality of what the tension is. And, you need to hold that line and face the reality. And then you have to allow yourself to soften and accept it
Mm.
because it's both Saturn and Neptune. The Saturn's going to bring in this face reality, do the work. And then Neptune's going to say, soften it, accept it, and find some self-compassion or compassion for others along with that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to let you talk.
I was going to say this one in a certain way can be very simple. Children are expensive.
Right. And
And
our creative
yeah,
processes can
yeah.
be very expensive.
And like coming up on the holidays, it might be that you're trying to figure out, like, what kind of gifts do you want to get for your children? And part of you is like, well, that's too expensive. No. And then the Neptune part's like, yeah, but they need to be kids. They need to be allowed to imagine and play and not have to worry about boundaries. So it kind of does bring in, I mean, even if that's not your reality with Scorpio rising, but it does get the story across, the idea that you're trying to figure out you evaluate your resources and what to spend them on or how to use them. And one of those resources is also your self-esteem and how you value yourself plays into the story. And so you have to look at that as well. But that's kind of what came to me. I was like, oh, in a nutshell, is that. I mean, obviously, yeah, like you said, it could be that you have this really expensive, maybe you like to build giant sculptures and you want to spend a ton of money on your materials this year. And you're like, yeah, but money's a little tight. And there's all those tariffs and all this stuff. And, so it is that dance. And you can see both of them somehow have to do with your resources, your financial resources, and then just the idea of joy and love essentially being a resource.
Right.
So I think there's something about that. And part of this whole process is you've got these planets in Sagittarius in that area where, like you said, Laurie, it might be pretty easy for you to spend money because it's Sagittarius in your second house. But now everything's getting ready to go into that serious place of Capricorn. And before they do that, they have to contend with this issue. They have to contend with the cold hard reality of whatever it is coming from the fifth house. And then you have to contend with oh wait, but I'm being too harsh and I need to allow for some fuzziness here, and then those planets can go into Capricorn. And by those planets, I mean the Sun, Mars, Mercury, Venus, all successively going to Capricorn. Where you have, Capricorn's your third house. So you're quite serious here. Like the way you use your voice, you feel a real responsibility about how you're going to use your voice. And doing this little dance that we're talking about is going to really help you take your own voice more seriously and use it as a way to navigate your environment in a way that is very mature. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, and the other thing we want to think about is that this is wrapping up, ultimately, this is really helping to wrap up the story of both Saturn and Neptune, which, both dipped into Aries and are now back in here for their last little period of time in Pisces. So you've been really developing a lot of understanding of your own the ways that you give love, the ways that you work with your own creativity. So there's a way that this whole storyline is preparing you to take that next step into a more serious way of dealing with your day-to-day routines,
Yeah.
ultimately.
Okay. Cool.
Cool, cool.
Cool. All right. Sagittarius rising. Okay, let's see. So, those of you with Sagittarius rising, let's talk about this month of December. We've really painted this picture of there being some challenge and difficulty during this month, but also opportunities for growth, opportunities to take yourself more seriously in a certain light could be very helpful. So, please refer back to the beginning of the video if you haven't, just because we really kind of lay out all those themes. But what you need to understand is that for those of you with Sagittarius rising, there's an essential tension that's being brought up in this month of December. And for you, it has to do with yourself and your home life. There's some kind of pitting of those two areas in your life. And this can be, I mean, it's going to be a bunch of things. This can be, tension with your actual home. There's something going on with your actual physical, tangible home that needs something going on, maybe some renovations or something. But it also can be tension with your inner sense of foundation, your emotional foundation. And it would kind of play out like you're feeling pretty adventurous, you want to try something new, but it kind of threatens your own emotional foundation, or that you have to move, and that's where a lot of the tension might be coming from. And it's really going to shake up your overall life direction. So there's some tension between those two areas of your life. I think you kind of get the idea. That's where the chief part of this tension is. So now what's happening is you've got the sun moving into Capricorn, but you also have Mars, you've got Venus, and you've got Mercury that are all hovering at the end of Sagittarius, and then having to come into these really intense square contacts with first Saturn and then Neptune before those planets can then carry on their way and move into Capricorn. So this tension is really shows up sort of like a roadblock at first, because each of those planets, bam, smacks into Saturn, which is the reality check, the something like maybe your mortgage is just too expensive. And
Mm.
that's the smack in the face of like, oh God, something's changing about my home life. So
Mm.
something very concrete might be difficult. It could be more of an emotional reality that you're realizing. You're like, whoa. But then those same planets then square Neptune, which can be very confusing. Like, wait a minute, I thought we were going here, and now I'm not so sure. And there's a message here about bringing in the Neptune piece, and the Neptune piece is really bringing in, I don't know, some kind of acceptance, some kind of understanding that maybe I don't have all the answers and that's okay. Some kind of softness, like compassion towards yourself for navigating a change that doesn't feel comfortable. There's something about that.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, I
I,
don't
I
know.
think it's important here to think about, you know, Neptune moves so slow. We're not even going to think about how long it's been in there in your fourth house, but Saturn's been in there about 2.5, 3 years. And you've been really facing reality and working hard in this area of your home, your family, your ancestral line, like Jennie said, your deep inner core. I think of it a lot as that home and family. Like maybe there's some way. I just imagine this person with Sagittarius rising, and yeah, they want to travel, they want to grow, they want to, explore the world, but their mother's getting really old and maybe needs to get put in a nursing home. There's some way that something from that ancestral line or home area, yeah, whether it be a renovation or whatever, there's some way that the home and family area is really pushing against your desire to grow. And
Mhm.
before, yeah, as all of those planets are pushing into Capricorn and have to face this reality of what's going on in the home or family, and then allowing you to open up to the softer side, this is all a preparation for all of those planets that are traveling with the sun to go into the second house where you can get really serious about your own self-worth or finances or whatnot. And, at the same time or shortly thereafter, what is it, February, when both of these bump into Aries, the Neptune and Saturn, they'll go
Mhm.
in there over the next few months anyway. And this is really a big change because this is the planets going into a cardinal sign. It's a whole new world. Neptune and Saturn have already dipped into Aries. This is their last little piece. It's like wrapping up and tying a bow on what you've been learning around home and family.
Yeah, and I mean, in a nutshell, you are wrapping up, just as Laurie's saying, a much longer process of um, really having compassion as something at the roots of your personality. I mean, the fourth house can be really seen as that, and the home life is a mirror for that. You
Yeah,
know, the possibility of developing that kind of Piscean empathy and compassion. So that's kind of that's the longer story here, that you've really gone through a big tempering, and this final stage here in December is sort of the staccato, the short, sharp bursts of like, how are you handling these lessons?
right.
And really giving you a chance to see that. And I was thinking about your comment too. If you are a
Huh.
Sagittarius person who's ready to go traveling the world, well, once everything moves into Capricorn, then you're going to start figuring out how to pay for it. That's where you're going to deal with the money of the whatever your travel plan is. And then once Neptune and Saturn go into Aries, it's going to be a whole new area of creative self-expression for you.
Right.
So, what an interesting time period to be in, I think.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
it is. And boy, I've just got to say this is my daughter's, and boy, I know how this is playing out. It's fascinating. It's fascinating to watch this, how these things play out for real people.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. Well, I think that once we wrapped up Sagittarius, they're ready to move to
Yes,
Capricorn.
let's go on. Okay.
Awesome.
So, for those of you with Capricorn rising, first of all, please watch the very beginning of this video. That will give you kind of a foundation that will help you understand what December is really about. The month of December 2025 is a really interesting month. It's got its challenges, to say the least. We've got the sun moving through Sagittarius. But the sun is not traveling alone. The sun never travels alone, but right now it is traveling with Mars, with Mercury, with Venus. They're all traveling in a little pack. And before they can go into Capricorn, they each have to individually first form a challenging square aspect to Saturn and then do the same with Neptune. Square aspects are challenging. It's like a roadblock. Well, Saturn is like it's hit a roadblock, and they
Mhm.
each have to hit Saturn first. So, where does the challenge come from? First of all, the challenge is coming from the third house. And the third house is the area of life that is it's about how we use our voice. It's also about, you can think of it as our immediate environment and the people in our immediate environment that we didn't choose, our siblings, our cousins, our neighbors, etc. And the challenge is on the 12th house for you. So there's some way that the immediate environment or the people in it are challenging your deepest unconscious expansive understandings.
Yeah.
So, what is that about? And what is it that you have to kind of dance through in order to, in order for all of these planets to move into the serious Capricorn house, which is, you as an authority.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
what you want to think about is, what's that roadblock in the immediate environment? Is it a sibling? Is it a neighbor? Is it your own discomfort with how you use your voice in some way? How you speak to these higher hidden understandings
Yeah.
within?
Mhm.
What's that challenge? Because once you hit the wall of Saturn, and let's just say, for an example, that it's the voice of a sibling, your higher understanding, your unconscious beliefs are maybe being challenged by a sibling, and you have to hit that wall. And then you have to kind of back up and let them have whatever beliefs they have, because Neptune says, you can't really be so harsh here. You need to have a little compassion for why they've developed the ideas they've developed. So there's some conflict there that you really have to work with before these planets can go and support you.
Mhm.
And then we get into the bigger picture, right? The
Mhm.
bigger picture that as these planets are, as Saturn and Neptune have been in that area for a couple of years now, they've been really working on helping you develop these relationships and your own voice. And that story is about to end, and the new story is going to be about home and family.
Yeah, and I think, the bigger picture here too is just like as a person with Capricorn rising, like you are preparing to step forwards into a new and more powerful period of your life. And part of it has to do with once those planets, meaning the Sun and Mars and Venus and Mercury that are in your 12th house in Sagittarius right now, making the square aspect and having to overcome that challenge, then they are moving into Capricorn, which for you is your first house, such a powerful house. And Capricorn is a very serious sign. So it is time for you to embark upon a new venture or something serious here that you're taking responsibility for on a new level. And the fact that Neptune and Saturn are going into Aries is really bringing in your location. It's bringing up your home
Mm.
and where you live. And that also might be something that is going to change into a wholly new direction.
Yeah.
So that's what you're preparing for. You're doing this work, so if there is a sibling that is pissing you off and bringing up some issues, it's really is for your own good because you're learning how to set a new boundary around it. Or maybe it's a neighbor that's driving you insane and you're learning how to set a boundary. Yet maybe allow yourself to be curious about where that person's coming from. Maybe delve into some empathy a little more, whether it's the sibling or the neighbor. That's definitely what Neptune is asking of you. But it's really laying this pathway so that when you move into this next phase of your life in 2026, particularly, but in January and then on into February and beyond, that you really have this new skill set. The 12th and the 3rd are both very much about your education. The 12th is more your kind of spiritual education, your spiritual resources, and your 3rd is more of your tangible, your learning
Mm.
that you can employ. So there's I don't know. It's a good time. It might not necessarily be this some big, really difficult thing. It might be as simple as a difficult conversation that gets you thinking and allows you to get some therapy about it and turn it into something different. So
Yeah, and if you've got Capricorn rising, Saturn and Neptune have already dipped into Aries.
yeah,
Now they're retrograde back in Pisces, but they've already dipped into Aries. You know that there are big changes coming around your home, around your family, around your understanding of your ancestral line, your
yeah.
deepest core. There are big changes coming there. And these squares, whereas they may be really difficult and challenging, they are helping to prepare the ground for that longer term work.
Mhm. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. Aquarius rising. Okay. So the view with Aquarius rising, we are in our preparations for a fairly challenging December ahead. So buckle your seatbelts.
Buckle up.
That's right. And if you haven't checked out the beginning of this video, please do so because it kind of lays out the pattern here that we're talking about. But in a nutshell, what December's bringing is a good deal of tension potentially. And for you with Aquarius rising, the tension is between your community and your own values.
Mm,
You may be feeling quite a bit of pressure around your values, or maybe your finances could also be something that was part of this. And it is affecting your ability to interact on a community level.
mm,
It's somehow impacting it, it's changing it, it's forcing you to look at things in a new way. So that's kind of the really quick version. What is going on is we have the sun on these charts, and the sun is sort of in alliance with Mars and Venus and Mercury. That all four of those planets are coming to the end of Sagittarius, and before they're allowed to go into Capricorn, they
mm.
all get into this intense entanglement with first Saturn, which is kind of the reality check, the wall, the ooh, I looked at my checkbook. I know that's old fashioned, but whatever. And my finances aren't quite lining up. And then followed by a square to Neptune each individually, which can bring in some confusion about what to do next. It could bring in a bit of a fog or maybe even some despair about, oh, my finances aren't quite what I thought. But the thing to learn here is to, I don't know, develop a broader view of your resources. Maybe it's to do with your money, but it might just be taking stock of all the resources you have. And as
Mm,
a person with Pisces on the second house, these can be really intangible resources
mm,
that you have at your disposal. Your mystic mindset,
mm,
your ability to be in touch with empathy and compassion might be a great resource for you. So it's a time to really take stock of those and to grapple with that idea of like, where are your limits that have to do with this? Where are your financial limits? Where's the limits of your own value system? And then soften into, and where can I incorporate more of the softer things? Like where can I incorporate empathy? Where can I incorporate maybe a more imaginative,
mm,
speculative way of thinking about things?
mm.
Or a transcendent view. So that's in a nutshell, that's some of the tension. But yeah, I don't know. Laurie, what would you like to pipe in here?
Well, I was just thinking about, that square itself and the challenge between community and finances. There's so many ways that can play out. Maybe you really want to be part of a particular community, but you look at the people in that community and you realize they're all way wealthier than you are, or you're way wealthier than them, so you feel guilty, or, whatever it is, money can bring in so much. I mean, you really start understanding the connection with the second house between money and self-worth, and how we feel about ourselves is so connected. So there's some way in which the community and the resources feel at odds. And you really do. Yeah, you've got to face the reality of that, the reality of what your situation is, and the reality of how it impacts your community and your connection and your ability to receive from community.
Yeah.
There's something in that that's important. But, one of the things to realize is that for those of you with Aquarius rising, this area of money and resources has been very activated for a long time. You've been learning a lot about what that means, about what that connection between money and resources and self-worth means. And this period of time and all these squares of these planets to these two planets really is preparing for that story to be wrapped up.
Mm,
You know, it's been a long development for you to understand this area, but it's time to wrap it up. And these little challenges, which might not feel little in the moment, um, but they're pretty quickly passing. December is going to bring these bumps, this facing reality around your finances and how they connect with your community, and then finding a way to be compassionate with yourself, or finding a yeah, a mystical understanding of your own self-worth. This is really tying up a story.
Yeah.
It's ending a story. And these planets, you've already gotten a little glimmer of the next storyline.
Yeah.
The next storyline for you is going to be a lot about how you use your voice and getting really serious about how you use your voice. Um,
Yeah.
that's a big piece of what's coming. So these little lessons right now are preparing you for that.
Yeah, and just the final thing to bear in mind is that once the each planet, does the square to Saturn and Neptune, it goes into Capricorn. And so you do have some time then to, really get serious about what are those subconscious patterns that are in the 12th
Mhm.
house, to take ownership in a new way and bring a deeper level of healing and acceptance is, I think, part of the work here. So you have January for that integration period, before you move into a new phase when Saturn and Neptune move into Aries and it's your third house. So yeah, it's all for your
Yeah,
growth
we
and
do need to
development.
make a video about Saturn and
Yeah.
Neptune's conjunction.
Yes. And let's move to Pisces.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, so for those of you with Pisces rising, well, December's a tricky month. We've been talking about it here a lot, and if you have not watched the very beginning of this video, please do so. It'll give you more context for this conversation. But bottom line, if you've got Pisces rising, the focus of the season every year at this time, the focus is the sun's moving through Sagittarius for the bulk of December. For you, that's very public. You have Sagittarius at the top of your chart. You bring a lot of expansive pleasure into your social reputation, your career, all of that. So that's where the sun is. The sun is currently traveling with Mars, Mercury, and Venus. They're all together. And the issue here for December is that each one of those planets, before they can go into Capricorn, has to kind of walk through this gate where they first hit a square aspect, a challenging aspect to Saturn and then to Neptune. So each one of them has to face reality. Now, where's the tension coming from? The tension is very much coming from the self. This is kind of interesting. It's like your own personality is in some way getting in the way of these planets that are going through your 10th house. So before you can really get serious about your involvement with your community, you have to first face yourself. Isn't that interesting? That's really an interesting one. Saturn has, these planets have been in your first house, working through that first house for a very long time, a couple of years. Saturn's been moving through that first house. You've been really working hard to face the reality of your own personality.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
I mean, yeah.
go ahead, jump in.
I was just going to say too that, the first house has to do something with your life path, your life direction. So it might be that, you really want to take it in this other way, but there's being other demands being placed on you in your professional life or in the public space of the 10th house is saying, nope, we actually need you to keep staying in this role. And meanwhile, there's some other path calling you, and you're kind of, not quite sure how to handle that shift. That's what it made me think of. So, yeah.
It's interesting. Saturn moving through the first house is really interesting, and
Mm.
it can really, we have to get serious about who we are and where we're going. And with Pisces rising, people with Pisces rising tend to be pretty idealistic, but Saturn going through there is like, no, we've got to get really serious. Before these planets can move forward, they have to face this little gauntlet. How can I wrap up all that I've learned about who I am and the direction I'm going? How do I do that? What are the steps
Mhm.
that I take before these planets change sign into the cardinal signs?
Yeah, and I can't help but think this one particularly right now in this period of time, this is a lot about how you take your authority in the public space. Because all of those planets, as soon as they leave Sagittarius and handle this situation, they go into Capricorn, which is
Mhm.
where you are showing up in front of groups. And Capricorn is, definitely like the CEO vibe, the like executive power, and the authority. So it's sort of like you're having to make sure that you understand what boundaries you have to set personally and what type of compassion you need to exude and emanate to others in order to step into that authority place, as planets move in these next few weeks in through Capricorn. And really, there's a big demand here. This one's quite serious. I mean, they all are with this square, but this one in particular is like, who are you? How do you want to show up? How do you want to show the fact that you know how to set boundaries and you know how to be compassionate? I mean, that's the bottom line.
Yeah, that is the bottom line. And I'm so glad you brought that up, that Capricorn, the 11th house, the CEO kind of energy. Because I remember when I was younger and early in my studies, just not understanding how the rising sign sets up everything.
Oh
And
yeah.
I remember seeing, public people, people who were like serious public figures with Pisces rising. It never made sense to me because Pisces is so dreamy and, you wouldn't think that, but with Capricorn in that 11th house, that really puts the authority in the community. It's just fascinating
That's
how these work.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
okay.
I think
Okay.
we're ready to wrap it up and
Think
there's
we'll
that.
okay.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. And
Yes.
I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday. I think the perfect gift is an astrology consultation of some
That's
sort.
right.
Yep. I've got a bunch of different offerings right now and of varying price ranges. Please check them out. And yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
wonderful.
me too. Thank you.
All
Thanks,
right.
Laurie.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Jenny.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.